Good morning, everybody. And happy Mother's Day, because this is my moment to get to say that to you all. Happy Mother's Day. As a church, we love you. We see you. Thank you for the role that you play. For the many of you that play roles that it's not even biological. You just play the role of a mom, all of it, all of those things. We just thank you guys. That is no small thing. And I hope you feel celebrated and loved today. You know, today in our service, we're going to continue in this series called Follow Me. And I get to close it out here today. We've been looking at the life of Abraham and what it means to be a person of faith. He's this great example of faith, lived out in the Old Testament, echoed all the way through the New. And so we've been looking at his story and trying to learn some things along the way. And today we get to do that same thing. I want to start with a story. When I was a kid, I went to church at one point, and I remember we studied like this one verse out of 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It's often known as the love chapter in the Bible, and I'm gonna guess that many of you know this verse. And even if you've never read this section or this chapter, or you've never even read the Bible, I bet you went to a wedding where you heard this, or you saw this on someone's wall or in Hobby Lobby. I don't know where you go, like wherever it is, right? But like it says love is patient and kind and does not envy or boast and so on. So they told me, go home and read that. And like, you know, just study it. So I did as a little kid. I'm like, I'm going to go home and I'm going to read it. And I found 1 Corinthians chapter 13 in my Bible and I started to read it. That verse is verse 4. I didn't make it past verse 2 because I just started reading. I'm like, well, I'll read Corinthians 13. And I just started to read my way through it. And then the next thing I know, I'm stuck. And it's because I read this. It says, Paul writes this. He says, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers, if I understand all mysteries and I have all knowledge, and if I have all faith, so as to move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And here's the deal, you guys. Just the theology Paul's probably wanting us to take from this passage is about the supremacy of love. And he's using really big illustrations to go, do you see how big of a deal love really is and how important it is above all these things? But I was a little kid reading this passage and I didn't get any of that. What I got, I just read the Bible and the Bible said that you can have the kind of faith where you look at the mountains and they move. So I remember being a little kid and going like, I'm reading that God is gonna give me telekinetic mind powers. If I have enough faith, I can like literally move a mountain. And I remember reading this and going like, let's do it. And so I closed the book. And then I walked outside and I grew up out in the middle of the desert in the Tucson Mountains and I stared at Sombrero Peak and I literally just like garnered all of the concentration and certainty that I could. And I stared at the Tucson Mountains, I stared at Sombrero Peak and I just looked and I said, move. And nothing happens. I know it's shocking, right? Nothing happened. So I thought to myself, you know, what am I missing? I didn't go, maybe there's something I'm misunderstanding. I was like, no, what am I missing? I need more faith. That's what I need. I need more faith. And so I dropped to my knees in the middle of the desert. And I was like, God, see, I'm not just gonna go pray in my bedroom. Like, this is the kind of faith I'm gonna show you that I have. I'm out in the middle of the desert. I'm gonna drop to my knees out here. And I drop to my knees and I just start saying things I believe to God in like a prayer format, as certain as I can possibly muster to show like, I'm like trying to pull in all the faith from the universe, so to speak, right? And so I start saying like, God, I believe in you. I believe in Jesus. I believe that he was the Son of God. I believe that he rose from the dead. I believe that you are everywhere all of the time. I believe that you know all things. I believe you hold the universe in the palm of your hand. I'm just saying as like certainly and emphatically as I possibly can, like all of these things that are kind of hard to wrap your head around and believe at different times. And I'm like, and I believe it's true. This is all certain. And then I stood back up. I said like, amen. All right, let's get back to it. And I stood back up and I looked at Sombrero Peak, and this is so embarrassing. Like a bad X-Men movie, I put my hand out, you know, like I can concentrate my powers. I don't know. I was a little kid, you guys. And I just pointed at the mountains and I said, move. And it didn't happen. I know you guys are shocked. Looking back, I'm really thankful. I'd have killed so many people. Like if that mountain had moved, this would be a bad moment, right? Like that. So looking back, I'm grateful for that. But it's funny, I didn't walk away from that moment going, oh man, maybe I misread this passage or interpreted, or I missed the point of love when he was actually talking about this. I walked away from that moment being like, oh, it didn't work. I don't have enough faith. There must be doubts in me. There must be uncertainty in me. There must be something in me that I need to fix. I need more faith. You know, I'm also somewhat embarrassed to say that this whole exercise was not a one-time moment. Over the course of my childhood and even into the first part of adolescence, I think I've looked at every mountain range in Tucson, like maybe one was easier to move, you know? Every mountain range in Tucson and been like, move because of this passage. And you're all shocked and surprised. I know that it never really happened. Right? And each time I didn't find myself thinking, oh man, what am I missing? I found myself thinking, there's doubt, there's uncertainty. I need more faith. And I tell you that story because it's easy to smile at. It's easy to smile at a little kid out in the desert doing weird stuff, like holding his palm up at Sombrero Peak and yelling that the mountain needs to move. It's easy to smirk at all of that, at a quirky little kid who reads the Bible and is like, let's get after it, right? But I share this story with you because I actually think more of us, if we're really honest, are like that little kid than we often like to admit. I do. I think more of us find ourselves in places and spaces in our lives where we think things like this statement. Have you ever found yourself thinking, if I just had more faith, then this would have happened? You ever had that thought? I actually talked with lots of people that do this. Maybe you would say, if I just had more faith, I would have gotten the job or the race or the promotion. But there's just something about, I didn't trust God enough or whatever that is. I'm not sure. If I just had more faith, I would have conquered my struggle. If I just had more faith, I would have mended the relationship. If I just had more faith, I would have found a way to make it work. And we can think things like that. If I just had more faith, I would have found the kind of person that I want to be with in my life, and I haven't found him yet. And if I just had the kind of faith that I need, maybe God would bring the right things into my life, and I'd have that. See, sometimes we think if I just had more faith, if I didn't have doubt, if I didn't have uncertainty, if I just had more faith, these moments would be working, they'd be happening for me. Or sometimes we think a different version of the same statement. It's not if I just had more faith, this would have happened. It's if I just had more faith, this wouldn't have happened. And we look at things like, if I just had more faith, my kids wouldn't be struggling the way that they do right now. Right? It's just as a parent, your heart wants that. And you're like, God, I trust you. And if I just had more faith. Or if I just had more faith, my life would be different. Some of us think that. If I just had more faith, the person I care about would be healed. If I just had more faith, I would be healed. If I just had more faith, the person I love would still be here. We have these moments. If I just had more faith, I wouldn't have lost what mattered to me. And if I just had more faith, this thing wouldn't keep happening. And you see, when you start to think about it, even if like our brains know better because we've read a verse or we've heard a sermon or we've have kind of oriented ourselves differently to things, we still feel and think these things at times because there's something about faith. In some ways, many of us know what it is to stare in a mountain of circumstance in our own lives at some point in time, and you find yourself going like, I want it to move, and you ask for it to move, or you pray to God, like move it, adjust it, change it. Make it different than what it is. And then when you keep staring at the same mountain in front of you over and over again, at times you just find yourself looking, going, I think I'm starting to struggle with faith. And I think this thing is starting to get difficult. And we quietly just start to believe that doubt and uncertainty is the enemy of faith because we're losing those pieces. And so today I want to look at a person in the Bible, a person in the life of Abraham, actually, who has great reason to have good, honest doubt. They're not stupid. They're not bad. This is not because they're less or they're weak or because of an inadequacy in them or something's a fault or a failure. This is because life has shown them something at some point in time that they just have good reason to have honest doubt. And they walk into this, and this is Abraham's wife, Sarah. She even goes so far as to laugh at the very promise of God at some point in time with a little bit of cynicism that exists in her because she's wrestling with the doubt and the things that exist there. And so it's easy for us to look at her and go, well, okay, so she's a cynic or she's a doubter, or she lacks faith. But then there's this crazy thing that happens in Hebrews. Do you know the book of Hebrews chapter 11 is often referred to, that chapter is referred to as like the Hall of Fame when it comes to faith. People will call it the Hall of Faith. And it's a list of all of these great people throughout the Jewish history that you just see as great, extraordinary human beings of faith. And she's in it. Her name's in it. And I want to walk through this story as we come to see both of these things. And my hope for you and for myself is this, that we would come to see that there is actually room for honest doubt amidst an honest kind of faith. That's the desire that I'd hold and hope for today as we walk into this. So we're gonna walk through this story. It's in Genesis chapter 18. It is a quirky story, and it's fun and different and unique. And so we're gonna read through it. I'm gonna walk us through it, and in the very end, I promise this will make sense. So hang with me along the way, and we'll just kind of go on for the ride. Genesis 18, verse 1. We'll just jump right in. It says, "And the Lord appeared to him," and this is Abraham, "by the oaks of Mamre, as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day." And in just a moment, we're going to skip ahead in this passage, but I wanted to start at verse 1. And the reason I wanted to start at verse 1 is because we get to see something. The writer here in Genesis shows us something that Abraham, as the reader, that Abraham doesn't know about. And it says right there that the Lord appeared to him. But Abraham doesn't know this, right? We get to go, okay, so God's going to show him something, do something, speak to him, like the Lord's going to appear to him. But when Abraham looks up, and you have to remember, he's in his homeland, he's with his family, or like wherever he's landed, I guess, but he's with his family, and they've got all their tents and things set up, and his people and community, that's all there. And he looks up in the midst of all of this, and there's three strangers. There's three guys standing in front of him, and they're like not his neighbors. They're not people he knows. These are visitors that have come into town, so to speak, and now they're there standing in front of him. And he doesn't know who these people are. This isn't what the Bible doesn't tell us, that he's like, oh, this is the Lord. He just sees three dudes standing in his yard, more or less, and is like, oh, we have company. And that's a big deal. Because this is an ancient Eastern culture. And in an ancient Eastern culture, do you know what one of the most important things in the world is the word hospitality. It's massive. And so when you show up, and this is still to this day in Eastern cultures, you can show up to people's houses that have little to no money or things, and they will give you everything. And there'll be a meal and a spread and all of this stuff. And it's because they'll do this for enemies, they'll do this for frenemies, they'll do this for friends. And it's because this isn't about the person, this is about you and your heart. And they're trying to show the kind of people that they are. And so when you don't do this, when you don't put out the hospitality, when you don't make space and put out the full spread, you're almost communicating that like, this is who we're not, and it brings shame upon you, your family, and things. So this was like a huge no-no if you didn't do that. So how many of you guys, don't raise your hands because you're probably going to have company today, it's Mother's Day, but like when you have company, it's a stressful occasion, right? Leading up to that, I grew up in a house where it meant like a week of yard work first, like, and we're going to go crazy, and everyone's like, just do whatever makes that person happy. Like, don't ask questions, just get out there and work hard. Like, that's what we're going to do. Can you imagine if somebody in this culture, if you were in this culture and somebody showed up and was suddenly standing in front of you and they're like, by the way, we're here. You ever had that moment where somebody's now at your house and they're like, hey, can I come inside? And you're like, yeah. And now you're like trying to get them a drink or something, and you're looking around and you're like putting dishes away while you're talking, and you're kicking stuff out of the way because you weren't ready and you weren't prepared for whatever that moment is, and it is stressful. So can you imagine three guys show up suddenly and you're supposed to have a full meal in front of them and you don't have refrigeration? They go crazy, guys. They freak out. They kill a cow. And not like they freak. I did this last hour too on accident. Not like everybody freaked out and we're like, we're going to kill a cow. Not like that. Like they literally are like, we need meat and we need to cook it. And right now, so they go and they butcher a calf. And they're just like, we got to do this as fast as possible, cook this meat as fast as possible. We need to get a spread. Abraham looks at the people and he's like, hey, let me send some people out to wash your feet and have a little bit of bread while you just kind of hang out and wait. And then he's like, Sarah, we have company. It's his wife. And all the servants and all the people, we got company. Everybody get it together. And can you imagine the frenzy that this would have been and the chaos and the crazy that this would have been? But they pull it off. They serve him food, and now all of a sudden they're eating. These three guys are eating under a tree, and Abraham's standing with them, and everything's hospitable and good. And Sarah goes back and is standing in her tent, which is like her house, more or less. This is where she is. Genesis, skip down to verse 9. Genesis chapter 18, verse 9. It says, they said to him, all right, so the three guys looking at Abraham, they said to him, where is Sarah, your wife? And he said, she is in the tent. Two things to know here. In an ancient Eastern culture, it's actually not appropriate for her. It wouldn't have been seen as customary for her to be like, and I went out and I had dinner with y'all. Three guys eating outside with Abraham, basically, they're not going to mix that up. And so the women would have been in one place, the guys would have been in another. This isn't like a community collective feast at this point in time. So Sarah's inside of her tent and they're outside. But we get the impression that from the story that she can hear and that she can see, like she's privy to what's being said and what's going on outside, but she's inside this thing. And two, she's probably grateful, right? Have you ever had the moment where you're finally like done with all of that chaos and done with all of that stuff, and you finally sit down in your own house and you take an exhale moment and you're just like, oh my gosh, this has been a stressful, crazy, chaotic day, and I'm glad that that's over with. Like I get to breathe now, and I don't have to do all of these things and all this stuff. And she's just probably recouping and recovering. But we're clued in suddenly to who these guests really are. Genesis 18, verse 10, it says, the Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Think about it. Imagine you're Sarah, and suddenly you realize, wait, this isn't just a random person outside. I thought this was just 3 random guests that I was trying to help out, and now I'm listening to them talk with like the authority of God, and they're talking about me having a son next year and different things, and I'm hearing all of this stuff. This is actually a bigger deal than I thought. And Sarah's inside the tent. She can hear all of this and realize all of this, and this is not a small moment. Up until this point in the story, you guys, every moment that where God came and steps in and makes a specific promise in the life of Abraham was to Abraham. Every moment was, he went to Abraham and he goes, I want you to leave the land of your fathers because I'm going to take you to a place that I want to move you and your family and bless you and for your descendants and their descendants and let's go. And so he makes that promise. There's another promise where he looks and he says, Abraham, I want to make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. And this is what I want to do for you. But he says that directly to Abraham. And then there's a moment where Abraham's wrestling with this and he goes, Abraham, you're going to have a son. I'm going to make this happen through you and through Sarah. And he says this directly to Abraham. This is the first time in the entire narrative that Sarah is the audience to that message. It's not a small moment. And she's suddenly in there. And by the way, the text doesn't tell us that, and God said these things to Abraham, and then Abraham was like, Sarah, sit down, we need to talk. It doesn't say any of those things. He may have told her, he may not. This is the first time she gets to have this moment directly, if it's not the first time at all. And so she's hearing this inside. And this should have been the best news ever. Because having a child in this particular culture, having a child is a blessing at any point in time, but having a child in this particular culture, that's a big deal. And it's because if you were a woman, you couldn't own property. You essentially, I know, and I'm not advocating for this, we're talking about ancient Eastern culture, but you essentially were kind of like part of your husband's household, and when your husband died, it's not like you suddenly inherited everything he had, someone else did. And so what you would do is you'd want to make sure that you had a son that things could be passed down to so that you could be cared for, because women outlived men, and I believe still do, right? And so this is a big deal, and that's your security, but also every family was kind of trying to make it better and better and move forward and forward. And so you need to be able to pass that down to a son. And this is what people cared about. And they didn't have kids. And so for her to hear, you're going to have a son, this would have been like an answer to prayer. This would have been such an extraordinary thing to say. For this to come true, she should be shouting and cheering and jumping, probably quietly in the tent, but just losing her ever-loving mind, because when you get good news like that, you celebrate. Right? We do. I remember my first date with Amber, who is now my wife. And it was this thing where we went out with a group of people, and it was great. It was delightful, and I thought it went pretty well, but I wasn't sure I was going to get a second date. Like, I didn't know it went that well. You know what I mean? And so I just found myself thinking, well, that was good. I don't know, I got to get up the nerve to call her again, or maybe I'll hear from her. I don't know. And one day, later that week, I went to go get in the shower. And I'm right about to get in the shower. I'm home alone, and the phone rings. And this is before we have cell phones. And so there's a phone mounted to a wall, a landline. And I'm home alone. So I'm like, well, I got to answer it. So I throw a towel on and I go running out in the hallway and I answer the phone and I'm like, hello? And it's her voice. Then I'm like, oh, hey, because that's what we do. You know what I'm talking about. Somebody in your house, if you ever have these moments, you'll watch. And some guy is going to be like, oh, hi. And then, oh, yeah, what's up? And you're like, what's her name? Who is she, right? This is what I did. And I need to be impressive now. Be cool, be chill, like make this okay. And so she's like, hey, I had a really good time, hanging out with you. And I was like, oh, or oh, cool, like all the things. And, and she's like, what are your plans? And I said, I don't know. Do you have any plans tonight? And she said, no. And I was like, and I muster up all the courage within me. And I'm like, would you want to go out on a date? Could I take you out for dinner tonight? And she goes, yeah, I'd like that. And then I'm just like, okay, play it cool. And I'm like, yeah, cool. So that's great. All right, sweet. Well, I'll pick you up in just like a little bit. Okay, okay. And then I hang up the phone and I don't have to play it cool anymore. I just get to hang up the phone. And now it's just me. I am home alone in a house and I celebrate. I'm like, yes. And then I yell, woohoo. And I jump in the air and I fist bump as I jump, kind of like the end of the Breakfast Club moment. Do you know what I'm talking about? And the next thing I know, I wake up and no, it's not a bad dream. It's worse. I wake up and my head is killing me. And I am laying on the floor next to the phone the way I was brought into the world. The towel's laying next to me. And I'm like, what just happened? And I suddenly realized that 6'5" me was standing under a door frame when I decided to celebrate. And that I cleaned my clock. I knocked myself unconscious and fell to the ground. And that was the beginning of date number 2, which is crazy actually, right? Because, and here's the thing, you know what I didn't do? I wasn't like, oh, I wonder if it's good news. Let's survey the environment and make sure this is okay to celebrate. That's not what you do. When you get great news, when something is amazing and you hear this, you celebrate. You don't look to see a door frame over your head. You just let it rip. You do the happy dance in your house and you get weird about it. And it's okay because this is what we are. Unless you have a reason to hold that back, right? Unless you have a reason to not do those pieces. And this is what happens with Sarah. Look at verse 11. It says, now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah. Such a big verse. See, what this is telling you is that she's pretty old. I believe she's 90 or right around 90 at this point in time. Some of you were like, wait, what? Yes. And this would have been something that she had longed to hear for decades. If you think about it, she would have longed to hear somebody say, you're going to have a child. You're going to have a son. This is what's going to happen with you. She would have loved to hear those words, but she didn't hear those words. And this would have been something that she would have prayed about. This would have been something she would have hoped in. This would have been something that she was excited for. And it just didn't happen. And now what you get to read here in verse 11 is Sarah's looking and going, I know my age and I know my body. Because when it says the way of women had ceased to be with Sarah, what it's trying to articulate is that she's past the point, she's past menopause here. And so her body is no longer operating in such a way where it's doing the things it even needs to do to bring a child into the world. And she's like, I know my age. I know my body. I know my husband's age. I know my husband's body. This isn't how this works. And so she hears what should have been like the best news ever. And for her, can you imagine? She's inside the tent listening to this, and 3 random travelers show up in her life and have the audacity to suddenly tell her, in 1 year, your wife and Sarah, you're going to have a child. This thing that you've hoped for, this thing that you prayed for, she would have had to grieve this loss at one point in time, and she probably would have grieved it on multiple times. She would have had to have gotten to the space where she's like, this is no longer in the cards for me, and just done the very hard work of accepting that piece for her life. And now 3 people show up that she's never met before. It's been a crazy, stressful day. She's hearing this, kind of overhearing it in the tent, and she's just supposed to suddenly look and be like, that's fantastic. This is great. Guys, you better believe she is a little bit doubtful at this point. You better believe she is a little bit cynical at this point. And not because she's doing anything wrong, because she can see her own self in the mirror. She knows who she is. She knows what life has looked like. She knows the different pieces that have actually happened in her life. She knows all the moments that didn't happen. Because she stared into the face of this mountain in her life and asked it to move or change or do something different, and it just sat there for so long that she finally just accepted it. And that's hard. Friends, sometimes we doubt, not because we don't have enough faith, but because life has shown us good reasons to doubt. Sometimes we doubt not because we're just, inadequate people who really struggle to believe things, but because life has stacked in such a way that it's shown us good reasons to doubt or to have hard moments. Sometimes God doesn't do what we want him to do. And I know that doesn't get said a lot because that's not a really popular thing, but it's true, isn't it? Anybody who's tried to walk in faith with God for any length of time, you know that there's been moments where you've wanted God to do something and he didn't do it. You know that you've prayed for something that didn't happen. You know that these moments occur. This is true. This is a universal experience that we have if you walk this thing out long enough. It is real. This is what Sarah would have experienced. Sometimes God doesn't do what we want him to do. Many years ago, there was a young man that wanted to meet with me. He was in college, and And I got the privilege of just sitting down and meeting with him. And at first, it was just like, cool, what's going on? Let's talk. And over time, I started to just learn his story. He came from a pretty difficult background. And so just consequently, there were so many obstacles for him to face and overcome in his life. And oftentimes what would happen is he's just in the midst of struggling through those things, and he'd make terrible decisions, or he'd do something that he really regretted. And he was trying to sort it out because he wanted to move his life forward, but he was just feeling stuck and struggling. And so he's like, and I just need someone to talk with. And I started meeting with this guy. In moment by moment, I just found my own heart going like, man, I love this guy. And he became like a friend to me. And not like a friend, he became a friend to me. And my heart was knit with his. I just cared about him. You ever have that moment where you shift from being like, I hope you have good things, and you're like, I want good things for you. Do you know what I mean? I care about you. I'm in. And I'm in this with you. And so we'd meet and we'd pray and talk through things. And I met with him so many times. I remember it was probably 2 years into us talking with each other, 3 years into us talking with each other. And he sat down with me and he wouldn't make any eye contact on this particular day. And he was being all weird and wouldn't really talk. And I was like, what's going on? And he just said, I made some decisions and did some things that really blew my life up, where I stepped back into so many of the things that we haven't talked about in a very long time. And I was embarrassed, and I didn't want to have to say any of it out loud. And I just was like, it's okay. Like, I'm sorry. And I prayed with him, and what do you need? And I just want to love him and pray for him and help him somehow, I don't know, move forward or even just be there. I don't know. I just wanted to meet him in the midst of that moment. Afterwards, I found myself praying that week and praying the next week and just praying for him and his life and praying that God would just give him peace and courage and wisdom and all the things to make the changes and to step into the life that he's been longing for and wanting to live. And then it was like 2-3 months after that, I got a phone call and he died in an accident. I know, I was really sad. And I was sad because of the loss of a friend. That's sad, but I was also really sad because there's like a period at the end of a sentence now. I don't know if that makes any sense. I was really sad because I just found myself looking and being like, these last several years, he's been working and trying, and we've been meeting and praying and talking, and he's been trying to move forward. And what is this? Now there's just like a period at the end of that sentence, and it just is. And I looked and I was like, and God, don't get me wrong, I'm grateful that he's with you and that struggling and those things are over. And I love that that's true, but I got a lot of frustrations and I got a lot of doubts and I got a lot of questions because you didn't do what I wanted you to do. I wanted to pray to God in that season of time, but I felt like I wasn't allowed to say what I wanted to say. Have you ever had that moment where you're like, if I say what I want to say to God, it feels like I don't have any faith, or I'm not allowed to say that because he's God. And so what I wanted to say to him was like, what was that? Seriously, like, what were the last couple of years? Why didn't you do what I wanted you to do? And not because I'm trying to boss God around. I'm like, I thought this was good. I thought this was, why didn't this happen? I never prayed that because I didn't think I was allowed. I thought I just needed to be a person of faith who was certain and just said God is good all the time. God is good in everything he does, and this is why, and all those things. And I didn't go and pray that prayer. Sometimes we pray that someone would be healed and they aren't. Sometimes we pray that something would change in us or in others, and it doesn't. Sometimes we invest our own hearts, our own lives, our own energy, just part of who we are, because we care into the lives of other people, other things, and then it doesn't happen because God doesn't do the thing that we ultimately wanted him to do. And that's hard. And that happens. And in those moments, it's really easy for us to look and just say, I think I just have all these doubts and it's clouding out faith. And I think I'm stuck here. And that's why I wanted to share that. I don't think that that's just my story. I get that moment is, but in some way, in some shape or form, lots of us experience these particular pieces because sometimes God doesn't do what we want him to do. Other times, it's not that God doesn't do what we want him to do. It's that God doesn't do what we want him to do when we want him to do it. You ever had that moment? That's weird. And it happens. The story of Abraham and Sarah actually ends with them having a child. That's the thing. They actually end up having a child. And so you can look and you're like, well, look, God did what they wanted him to do. And he did the thing that they wanted him to do. We should all just pause. How many of you would look and be like, when I'm really excited to be bringing a child into this world? When I'm 90. Yeah, does that fit your timeline in any way, shape, or form? If anybody in this room happens to be 90, when was the last time you thought, I think I'm at the right spot to be pregnant and to deliver a child. And not only at the right spot, let's do this with no modern medical care, and let's do this without a hospital, because this is the time, this is the season. Somebody after the last service came up to me who's a little bit older and essentially said to me, they're like, I looked at my wife and was like, let's go have a baby. And I said, and how was that? And he said, not good, right? Because good, they got what they wanted, but let's get really honest about this particular moment. Does that in any way, shape, or form fit the storyline that you're looking for your life? No. Sometimes God does what we want him to do. He just doesn't do it when we want him to do it, and that can get difficult. I became a youth pastor just shortly before my 19th birthday. I shouldn't have been a youth pastor at 18. I didn't know what I was doing. Like, they literally handed me keys and kids, and I was just like, oh my gosh, and just tried to figure it out. I was teaching 3 times a week because every time the church would get together, they're like, take the kids. And so I would take the middle schoolers and the high schoolers. There were about 20, 25, something like that, at this little church out in Picture Rocks. And so I was teaching them 3 times a week, and I stayed there for 2 years. I didn't know what I was talking about, you guys. And I think there's probably a lot of times we're just in the good nature of like, well, let's just talk through the Bible and see what it says. I probably said some crazy stuff, and I probably did. And at one point in time, I just was like, I think I need to go learn a few things before I teach a few things. Do you know what I mean? And I need to go anchor myself in something. And so people around me said, I think that's a really great idea. And we've been praying about it, and we think you should do that same thing. And I was like, I've been praying about it. I think I should do that same thing. And this seems like one of those moments where God's like saying, let's open this door and close these doors. And so I applied to a school in Chicago, Illinois. And it was a school for people who wanted to go into full-time ministry, and I already was in ministry. And so I thought this would be an amazing opportunity. Let's go do this thing. And so I went around to my boss at my job, and I said, I'm not going to be here anymore because I'm going to be going to school, and here's what I'm going to be doing. And so I'm sorry, but I want to give you heads up and leeway. And then I went to the church and was like, I need to plan to leave because I won't be here anymore because here's where I'm going to go. And I had all of these like closing conversations to like stop my life here in Tucson so that I could go to Chicago, Illinois. And then I got my letter, and it began with, I believe the word was like, sorry. It's not, it's actually, the word is unfortunately. It began with, unfortunately, you're not eligible for acceptance at this point in time, but we put you on a waiting list. That's never the word you want to read at the beginning of your college, like letter. Do you know what I mean? Unfortunately, that's a bad sign. And so I was just like, okay. So I called the college, and they said, I was like, what's the deal with the waiting list? And they said, well, you could be on here usually up to a year, and oftentimes it can be up to 5. And I was like, cool, that's not a small window when you're trying to start your life. All right, what do I do? And so I went back to all these people I had closing conversations with and was like, hey, can I get my job back? Hey, church, can I continue to do this here and partner with you guys here? And hey, sorry that I told everybody and said all these goodbyes and did all these weird things. And I know some of you guys are like, well, you jumped the gun. I know. But it was like the season, and it was the right time. And I told everyone I'll be here for at least a year, up to 5. And then I got a letter in the mail 5 months later. It said, congratulations. And I was like, of course you did, right? And not only did it say congratulations, it said you need to, if like you're no longer on the waiting list, you're accepted in order to be, it was in December, and it said in order to be here for the January semester, to start, we need you to be out here to report in 2.5 weeks. And I immediately just called everybody without warning and said, psych, bye, I gotta go. And just left everybody hanging, like people didn't have plans and things and stuff. And I just took off because that's what I was supposed to go do. And I showed up where I was supposed to go. And I just remember looking at God and being like, your timing is weird. Thank you, God, so much that you did what I wanted you to do. That's not a small thing, and I'm celebrating that, but like, why now? Do you know how much easier this would have been if it happened here? It's so much more difficult and crazy and complicated now. And I showed up in January in flip-flops and shorts because I'd never left Arizona, and that was a rude awakening. It would have been so much easier to get there in the summer, right? Because sometimes God's timing is just weird. And what can happen when he doesn't do what we want him to do, and he doesn't do what we want him to do when we want him to do it, or even how we want him to do it, is it messes with faith. And we can start to get doubts and uncertainty that cloud this out, and we start to think that that's like shrinking our faith or canceling our faith or somehow diminishing our faith. Look at verse 12. This is Sarah's reaction, standing inside the tent, and she gets to hear someone say with authority, in 1 year, she's gonna have a child. God's gonna do, this is what's gonna happen. And here is her reaction. So Sarah laughed. When it says that she laughed, it's not, woo, that's great, I'm so excited. It's this. That's the thing. It's when you laugh to yourself. This isn't the laugh of joy. This is the laugh of cynicism. This isn't the laugh of excitement. This is the laugh when you go, this isn't my first rodeo and I wasn't born yesterday. This is the laugh when you've had enough life experience and moments and things, and all those things start to stack up, that you found yourself sitting in the midst of some honest doubts. You see, she laughs, like I said, because she wasn't born yesterday. She laughs because she knows her age and she knows her body. She laughs because of all the times she would have prayed to hear these words and to hope to hear those words, only to hear them now at this stage in the game, at this place in her life. And she laughs because she's learned to protect herself from hope. Because sometimes that's what we do. Because opening yourself back up to that can be painful or hard or worrisome and all these different pieces. And no one was supposed to hear her laugh because she's in a tent by herself. This is just the honest version of her showing up to her very honest life. But God knows. Genesis 18, verse 13 said, the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? And I imagine in that moment, she's like, man, right? Like, why did Sarah laugh and say, shall I indeed bear a child now that I'm old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son. And then I love that this next part is in the verse, guys. I love it. I love the way this happens. I love the way this ends. I love the simplicity of it. I love everything it doesn't say. I love exactly what it does say. But Sarah denied it. All of a sudden, she pops her head out and goes, I didn't laugh. I love that moment. And then my favorite is the response. It says, for she was afraid. And he said, no, you did laugh. And then it's over. That's the end of this story. Isn't that amazing? She hears this, laughs to herself because of her own doubts, her own cynicism. And then he's like, why'd your wife laugh? Because he knows she's there. He knows what's happening. Why'd your wife laugh? And then she's like, oh gosh, he heard me. No, I didn't. He's like, yeah, you did. End of story. It's so good. And you know why I love it? I love this because I think there's something God teaches us in this story and in the way that this is written that I think is so incredibly important. Because here's what would have happened. If what we want to do right here is we want to end this story and go, so Abraham, for chapter after chapter and all these things echoed into the New Testament, is going to be known as the great man of faith. Right? He's the one he leaves his home and takes his family and does these things. Abraham's going to be the great man of faith. And Sarah's legacy will be she's the one who laughs. She'll have the legacy of she who lacked faith. She'll have the legacy of she who was a cynic. That's honestly what we want to do with this passage. And do you know what happens? Hebrews chapter 11. Remember I told you there's a chapter in the Bible that talks about the great heroes of faith and the people who we model and emulate when it comes to faith. Hebrews 11:11, it says this. By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. And I love this. Isn't it weird to read those back to back, by the way? You kind of leave one story and you're like, wait, how did we get here? And I think it's because there's something we don't understand about doubt and faith. There's something we confuse when it comes to doubt and faith. You see, we often think that in order to have faith, I must rid myself of all of doubts. So Abraham's going to get to be the great man of faith, and Sarah is going to be the cynic. She's going to be the legacy, the lack thereof. But that's not true. Sarah is actually a model for faith that we're told to emulate and model our lives after, and that her story is actually held up as a person of great faith in this particular instance. Right? We think we're supposed to rid ourselves of all of doubts, but then honest life happens where we honestly find ourselves with good reason to have some of the doubts we have because the things stack up and it just gets a little bit difficult with all of this. Or God doesn't always do what we want him to do the way we want him to do it. And yet the truth is, an honest life creates honest doubts for everyone. The truth is, an honest life will create honest doubts, and that's for everyone. And Sarah has all of this. Even when she goes, no, I don't. Yeah, you did. Right there in the midst of the passage, just in case we're not clear. And God reminds her not exactly of what he will do, but of who he is. What he doesn't do right here is go, yes, you do, and here's how you can know, and here's the certainty, and here's the things. He doesn't end with, and how dare you, and here's your sin. And he doesn't end with any of those things. It just goes, yes, you do. Yes, you did. And this is like God's moment of saying, I see you. You don't think I see you, but I see you in your tent. You don't think I see you, but I see you in the place where you're most honest. You're trying to pretend like you don't have these things, and you do. And I see you, and you can look at that like a rebuke. But guys, I just look at it as the God of the universe sees you as you actually are. He knows you. He knows what's there, right? You cannot know what God is going to do. You can even struggle with whether God is going to do it while still putting your faith in who he is. And that's the thing that we get from her. She's looking and going like, I really struggle to think that that's going to happen because of what has happened, because Sarah's lived an honest life and has honest doubts. But what does Hebrews tell us that her faith was in and that she was faithful too? Since she considered him faithful. But God, I know who you are. I have no idea what you're doing here because I'm just a human being. I have no idea what you're doing here because I'm just me hiding in a tent away from these circumstances. I have no idea what you're doing here because I've looked at the mountains and asked them to move so many times that I can't bring myself to do it anymore. And now if you tell me things, I'm just like holding it back. I have no idea how this works or what's going to happen, but I can trust you, who you are. I can trust in the God of the universe even when I have no idea why he does what he does or what he's doing in those moments. See, you can have honest doubt simultaneously holding honest faith. You can have honest doubt in something while you simultaneously hold an honest kind of faith in someone. And that makes room for the complexity of an honest life. And that's why I want to leave you with this. It's just one thing, and it's this. There's plenty of room for honest doubt in your honest faith. I want you to know that. There's plenty of room for honest doubt in your honest faith. When my friend passed away, I wanted to pray to God and thought I wasn't allowed because I just wanted to say, what was that? And why didn't you do what I wanted you to do? And why didn't this happen the way I wanted it to happen? And I thought I wasn't allowed. I wish I could go back and tell my younger self, not only that you are allowed to pray that prayer, but that in praying that prayer, you're holding honest doubt in something while bringing honest faith in someone. And that makes room for all this crazy and all this complexity. You don't have to pretend and you don't have to hide it. You can live it. But I can't go back and tell my former self that, but I can tell you. And I want you to hear, there's honestly room for honest doubt in your honest life as you seek to have an honest kind of faith. So friends, give yourselves permission to take your doubts to God. Give yourself permission, 1, to have doubts. Give yourself permission, 2, to take those doubts to God and be honest about those things with him. And know that that is not disqualifying your faith. That is not limiting your faith. That's not shrinking your faith. Sarah's in the hall of faith. Know this, your doubts don't make God smaller. Your doubts don't make God ineffective. Your doubts don't make God weaker. Your doubts don't suddenly, become something that's going to hold back what he does. He's God, right? If you're the power that holds God back, I'm scared. He's God. Like Sarah, God already knows you, he hears you, and he sees you. And some of you may go, so then what's the point of even bringing these things to him? Because when you bring these things to him, you're bringing you, the honest version of you, the most vulnerable parts of you. And you're saying, God, in midst of what I don't know, I trust you. And I'm sharing these things with you, which is a moment of faith and trusting you with these things. See, faith doesn't require you to pretend like you have no doubts. Faith doesn't require you to pretend like it's fine, I'm fine, everything is fine, when deep down, it's not fine and you are struggling and circumstances don't make any sense and things are difficult and you've stared at a mountain for too long. See, faith is when you go through the honesty of those moments and you say, I don't like what just happened and I don't understand why it did, but I'm trusting who he is. Despite the answers I don't know, what I can cling to is simply who God is, and I put my faith in him. You don't have to be perfect and you don't have to pretend. After all, God isn't looking to have a relationship with a perfect person. In fact, the person that he most wants to meet in the midst of this very messy and sometimes complicated life is you, the real you. He sees you, he knows you, and you can bring your honest doubts and your faith to him. And that's my hope and my prayer for you and for me. Let's pray. God, we love you and thank you so much that we get to be here today. And we just admit that faith is hard sometimes. God, it's hard to not know things. It's hard sometimes to struggle through moments that really matter in the depths of our hearts and just not know why you do what you do or what you're gonna do or how things work or all of those pieces, Lord, and just face those moments in life. God, I pray as a church that you help us to love each other through those moments. And God, I just pray for each person here that they would know that you give them permission to have those moments. And I just ask that you also give them the openness and the grace, the courage to take those things to you and to trust in who you are despite what we don't know. And God, for all the mothers in this room, Lord, today, as they go to celebrate and do whatever it is that's in the day ahead of them, I just pray that they would know how loved they are. I pray that they would feel your grace and know your favor and just stand in that, be delighted in and celebrated because we're so thankful for them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Guys, before you go, Before you go, if you're new, it's awesome to have you here. I'm gonna be right over here in this next steps area. Would love to meet you. If you're someone in this room who needs some prayer this morning, we have wonderful, amazing people that would love to pray for you. And for all of you guys, have a great Mother's Day today. See you soon.